Welcome back to Eyewitness News this morning. We're joined by Kevin Zolotor here to answer your legal questions. And we do have a caller already on the line. So, caller, if you're there, you can go ahead now and ask your question to Kevin.
Okay, we had brother-in-law move here from Florida, and it was supposed to be permanent basis, so he brought everything he owned. He left 6 months ago, and the only thing he took was what he could fit in his car. So we've been storing everything. How long do we need to wait, and what do we need to do before we can start selling things to get it out of the house?
That's an interesting question. Without knowing more of the facts and details, can't give you a specific answer, but probably going to depend on whether or not you had a contract, whether you were the landlord. Probably different if it's just a friend or family member who's just staying with you just temporarily and then moves out. But I would want to talk to a civil lawyer or a landlord-tenant lawyer. That kind of lawyer would be really able to answer that question probably pretty easily. So I would get someone like that on the phone if I could.
Could keep you out of a really sticky situation,
Yes,
especially when it involves family. We know that's always interesting. Well, Kevin,
Right.
You were telling me, too, that they might be revisiting in the Kansas State Supreme Court rules about breath tests when
Yes.
it comes to DUIs. Talk a little bit more about that. What's happening right now?
Well, a while ago, the Kansas Supreme Court had declared the law that made it a crime to refuse breath tests in Kansas unconstitutional. However, since that time, the United States Supreme Court has taken up a similar issue, and now the Kansas Supreme Court, based on the United States Supreme Court decision, has actually reheard that case, has revisited it, and we anticipate a decision will be coming down shortly. So at this point in time, we don't know whether or not Kansas will allow test refusals to be criminalized or not. So that's kind of pending right now.
Interesting. So what are people's rights with, if you are pulled over and police ask you to get out of the car, take a breath test, what are your rights as a Kansan right now when it comes to that situation?
Well, and that's a case-by-case basis. Right now, there is still a law on the books that makes it a crime, but it's only under certain circumstances. You have to have had a prior after 2001 and some other factual scenarios. So it's not a law that prohibits the same conduct for everybody. So you would really need to talk to a specific lawyer to find out what would happen if you refused a test. And then again, it's going to depend on what the Kansas Supreme Court does here in the future regarding the law on the books.
That's an interesting thing to keep an eye on,
Yes,
especially for
absolutely.
the rights of Kansans if you are pulled over in that situation and refuse that test. So,
Correct.
Interesting thing to watch. Thanks so much, Kevin. I
Thank you
appreciate
for having me.
talking about that one. Appreciate you, and thanks for your phone call, too. We're back here in just a second. We'll get another check of your forecast.